Well, welcome everybody to the Friday edition of Richardson Plano Networkers. Today, our talk is from Jason Powell, and it's entitled Broken Joker, The Road Back from Depression. All of us have stories from the lockdown. In fact, if you were on before we started today, we were sharing some of those, and many of those are still in progress. In this session, Jason will share his very personal story with some very human humor. It's a story of perseverance and hope and success. Jason Powell has coached, mentored, and led top gymnastic athletes at every level for 25 years. His leadership and mentoring skills have helped retain both athletes and coaches in the most competitive market in the country. Things being said about Jason are, I learned more about myself and gymnastics in 5 days than I learned in 5 years in another elite program. I would have left the sport without Coach Jpow's mentoring. And if Jason was a math teacher, I would have passed algebra. That's a good one. Jason is now applying what he has learned to teach and inspire leaders and mentors in all walks of life. Please welcome Jason Powell.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Everybody can hear me okay? Okay. This topic is probably one of the harder ones I actually speak on. I speak on mentoring, I speak on coaching all the time, but this one hits close to home because Broken Joker is me. I was a comic for many, many years, and what I found in the industry is everybody is broken in the comedy industry. I think that's what makes you funny. And we have to be able to joke about it. Unfortunately, before I became a comic, I didn't have a lot to joke about. Before I get into it, I want to let everybody know I do not have a medical degree. I'm not a psychologist, but what I do have is my survival story, my trail that I took. I went after depression the exact way I went after coaching, which is I found drills and skills I could use from better coaches. I threw out what I didn't need, and I kept what helped me. Although this is about survival, and what I like to focus on is the thriving afterwards. I like to, how should I put it? I like to classify exactly what I went through. When I tell my story, I don't want anybody to think I'm trying to one-up what they've been through. Everybody's depression is very, very personal. And everybody's depression is the hardest thing they've gone through. So I don't want anybody to think that I believe my story is one-upping anybody. What happened is I was a boxer and wrestler. I actually dabbled in MMA for a while. And I got my body to the best I could. And age caught up with me. And my last fight, I got knocked out, and my coach and I sat down and decided, this obviously isn't going to become my career. So I left fighting. Well, what happened is when I left fighting, I stopped working out. I stopped eating properly. I started hanging out with the wrong crowd. I mean, it's the same old. And what happened is what I didn't see why I did that, because I identified with working out. I identified with being a fighter. I identified with these things. And all of a sudden, the only thing I was doing that I think saved my life was I was still coaching. I was still coaching gymnastics, but physically and mentally, I was going down a hill. And the problem with depression is when you start down that hill, it's slow. You're not pedaling real fast. You're not getting going. And that hill is just, then all of a sudden you're on this decline and you can't control the ride anymore. The brakes don't work. There's nowhere to turn off. You just keep going down. My depression got really bad because when I didn't identify as a fighter and I wasn't really identifying as a coach, I wasn't doing my best coaching at the time. And that depression snuck up on me, and I was trying to be a person that I wasn't. I was listening to the people around me that said, no, you have to own your own gym. You have to be this person. And it went down further and further and further until I actually had a break. I am not very proud of the fact that police showed up at my house. I was taken out of the house, taken to the hospital. I was put on a 3-day hold, and on a 3-day hold, so it's number one in the nation from so nice, actually. After the 3-day hold, to make my journey even harder, my mom actually drove to Minnesota to get me. And it's a hard thing when someone you love and respect sees you in that place, sees you in that bad of every aspect of me. I was bigger than I'd ever been. I was mentally shot. I hadn't slept for 3 days. She pretty much poured me into a car and drove me back to Texas. While in Texas, I had another break with my stepdad. He pushed a little too hard. I pushed back, and I ended up in the hospital again. When I was in the hospital, a doctor walked in, looked me in the face, and said, well, you accomplished your goal. You are not going to make it till morning. Your liver is shutting down. It will be shut down by noon tomorrow, and you're going to die. I didn't know that this is the outcome of what I did. I think like most people, it was a cry for help. But I was in such a bad place. The actual words in my head were, I finally did something right. I'm finally going to be done with this terrible journey, and the pain is going to stop. Then something happened I didn't expect. I woke up the next morning. A few hours went by, same doctor walks into my hospital room, says, I have no way to explain it. Your liver did a complete 180. Your numbers are almost back to normal. You're going to be fine. At that time, I didn't know how to react to that. I think there was some joy deep down, but at the same time, there was disappointment because I knew what I was going through was going to keep going. I got put on a 3-day hold. I got put in a mental facility, which, by the way, if you're getting put in a mental facility, Texas is not the best place to do it. We're usually ranked about 28th to 36th. It was one of the most telling situations I've ever been in because the levels of mental disorder of the people in my section ranged everywhere from, there was a gentleman that actually had killed people. There were pedophiles. There were people that heard voices, to people that were just depressed, like myself. I got out after my 3 days. Nobody knew where I was. I actually had to call a cab to get home. And as I sat in my house, I did something that most people are unwilling to do, which was I called for help. I called one of my really good friends who was my mentor as a coach. And I said, I'm lost. I don't know what to do. And he said, Jason, how old are you? And I said, 35 years old. He said, what's the average age in America? I said, I have no idea. I don't know. At the time, I believe it was 74. He said, so worst case, you have 35 years to accomplish anything you've ever dreamt of doing. If you were 20 years old and I gave 30 years to do that, what would that I would become a stand-up comic. He said, what is keeping you from that? And I said, well, depression. He said, you're one of the best coaches I've ever seen. I think you can coach your way out of this. So I did it again, which this is the most important part of depression. You have to let your ego go. You have to be willing to let go and say, I need help, and not expect everybody to help you. Some people are going to be scared of it because they're looking in a mirror. Some people are going to be terrified of it because they know if they fail, they're going to have that on their conscience. But there are so many people that are willing to help, from psychologists to psychiatrists to friends to family members. Drop your ego, because ego kills, which is actually a band out of Brazil. It's actually ego kills talent, but it also kills people because you can't let it go. It's also the reason I think women suffer from depression more than men. I don't think it's true. I think everybody suffers from depression equally. I just think women are willing to admit it. Men are trying to keep this facade of who they are, and they have to let that go. But I did it, and I'm not going to tell you that the struggle was not real. It was terrible. I stumbled and fell many times. Happily, I did not end up back in a hospital. It was a very slow road. I went back to the gym, which most people don't want to hear, because that's one of the steps. You got to get into physical shape. You have to get outside. You have to get around people. And this is the trick that depression makes. It tells you you don't want to do that. But as soon as you get outside, you can feel the pressure lift. As soon as you go on a walk, as soon as you get into a gym, you can feel it lift a little bit. I went to a psychologist. She put me on medication. The day I got put on medication, my goal was to get off medication. You cannot rush it, though. You have to do what they tell you to do, because here's the number one key. You cannot thrive after depression if you don't survive depression. You have to survive. You have to do anything it takes to get to the next level. Depression is a war. Some people say you can win that war. I don't think you can. I think depression, you always have to be aware it's there, like alcoholism or drug abuse. It's with you. I don't feel it, but I know my warning signs of drifting into it. And I'm happy to say I was 35 years old when my worst breakdown happened. I'm now 49 years old. I have not had a fit of depression for the last 10 years. It was a hard road. I really feel I didn't start my life until after depression. I think it was always there. I had learning disabilities. I'm dyslexic. I have ADD, in case you couldn't tell, as I haven't sat still, even on Zoom. I think that nipped away at my self-confidence, always having those things in the back of my head, thinking I wasn't as good as everybody else. My first step was getting on medication and evening myself out. That was the hardest step. And then realizing that on the road to survival, there is no failures. There's only what I've accomplished and what I have yet to accomplish. I haven't looked at failure since I was 35. I haven't thought of anything as failure. Comedy was hard, but it was therapeutic for me. I went to my first open mic. I actually just had that person on my podcast that was actually at my first open mic. She was a mentor of mine. I was embarrassed that she actually saw me perform at my first open mic, because it was terrible for me. But she thought it was awesome to see me like that. I worked my way up. I actually got on staff with Hyenas while I was still coaching. And then for 3 years, I got to take a hiatus. I got to take a hiatus and actually write on my W-2 that I was a professional comic, which was one of my life goals. What I found, and why my new podcast is called The Broken Joker, besides being broken, everybody in comedy is broken. And there's an edge to comedy, a sarcasm, a negative outlook on it, that I was like, my road's not finished. And that's when I made the transition over to public speaking and podcasting, because I wanted to add some positivity to what I do. I try not to tell people too much when I'm speaking that I'm a comic, because then they expect it to be funny the whole time, which obviously it has not been so far. But the first thing after I got evened out, the next thing to do was give the person in the mirror a break. That I don't expect perfection from my athletes. I don't expect perfection from the people around me. I don't expect perfection from the coaches that work under me. But every morning when I looked in the mirror, I wanted perfection. And when I looked in the mirror, I would tell myself things that I wouldn't tell my worst enemy. I would tell myself I was fat. I would tell myself I was stupid. I would tell myself, why did you do that yesterday? Why did you make those mistakes? Things that I would never say to my best friend. I would never say to anybody else around me, but here I am, the most important person in my life, which is yourself, and I'm beating you down every single morning. Every time I tell that story, I think of the Saturday Night Live skit with where he looks in the mirror and he says, you're good enough, you're smart enough, and darn it, people like you, and making fun of that. But it's true. And I had to start doing that. I had to start finding my little battles and giving myself credit. Because if I'm gonna tear myself down when I do something wrong, why am I not giving myself credit when I do something right? And if a lot of you look at that in your own life, I think you'll see that. I think you'll see that you don't do that. You don't give yourself credit when you do something well. Same way when you're receiving compliments. The only thing you should say when someone gives you a compliment is thank you. That's the only thing you should say. Don't try to classify it. Don't try to break it down. Don't say, well, I'm not that good looking, or I'm not that smart, or I'm not that. No, the only thing we say is thank you. Another hard thing for me to do. It's so difficult. So after education was also myself a break and let myself be sick, because that's exactly what it is. That's what depression is. You're sick. It's like any other sickness. There's many reasons for it. It could be from an abusive background. It can be from medications you're on. It could be genetics. It could be a serious illness. It could be a death in your family. What starts it doesn't matter. You got to give yourself a break. You wouldn't get mad at yourself for catching the flu. Or as we talked this whole time, if you got COVID, it's not your fault. Even though there's news telling you now that it is your fault because you didn't wear your mask, or you didn't do this, or you didn't do that. Let's remember it's not. It's a sickness. And you may have made life decisions that got you there, but the bottom line is it's not you. And you have to stop seeing it as a weakness. Now that we're sitting at home without interactions, the only interactions that we get are on Zoom meetings, or for the very few seconds you're at Walmart or anywhere else. Getting outside, getting your vitamin D, getting your vitamin C, getting zinc, got ahead of myself there, getting your zinc. You don't see that in the news right now. And that's the most important thing you need to get is physical activity, sunshine, vitamin C, and zinc. If you get those things, you're doing the things you need to do to stay healthy. We're also ignoring our mental health, which what I'm finding is people are starving for any interaction they can get. When I go out and walk, if I go out and walk in my neighborhood, we've never seen more people than they are right now. I see people getting out and getting physical because they're missing that. Every person is making eye contact with me and smiling, even through their mask. You can always tell they're smiling because of their eyes. We got to remember this. This is our most important thing to keep us from slipping back into that depression. is that contact, even if it's just eye contact. Get out, do that. There's days depression will tell you you don't want to do that. If you're walking through Quick Trip or racetrack and you make eye contact with somebody and they don't give you that friendly face. Focus and see when you make eye contact with them and you smile and you say, hey, how you doing? Take an evaluation of how you feel right after that. No matter what their reaction is. I don't care what their reaction is. It doesn't matter. You instantly feel better. It's a stress reliever. Just like right now, washing your hands is a stress reliever. Petting your dog is a stress reliever. Use those little things, those little battles, and cherish them. When I say hello to a stranger, which I do to every single person I meet, I don't care if it's racetrack. I don't care if they look like they're having a bad day. I do it because right afterwards, I get this little twinge of happiness that I really can't find anywhere else. It's funny. It's the same way I feel after my son hits a home run in a baseball game, or my daughter is at a dance recital. It's almost the same thing. And I think we underestimate that in today's society, especially with everything that's going on right now. Throw a compliment with it. If I see something, I'm a shoe guy. They make fun of me at work constantly because I have about 30 pairs of tennis shoes that I wear to work. And they're unbelievable. I usually get Asics, and they're called the Platinum Edition, and they got bright gold on the back of them. It's like a plastic. They're obnoxious. They're terrible. And then I get them in fuchsia, and I get them in bright pink, and I get them in all these different terrible colors that a 49-year-old man probably shouldn't be wearing. But I love shoes. You will not believe when you notice somebody's shoes, how you make their day. When I walk past and I see a woman that has a good pair of shoes on, I let them know. And if I know the designer, I'll even say the designer, and they're blown away. And it makes their day. For the rest of the day, they walk a little different. They walk a little taller. We got to remember this. But the number one thing to thrive after depression, you have to remember, is to embrace your weirdness. Be gloriously weird. I pride myself on that. I'm a goofy dude. That's what I do. I'm goofy. I love to be weird. I get a little bit of joy when I make other people uncomfortable with my weirdness. I like it. Sometimes I'll say things that nobody else is thinking or saying. And the looks that I get, my brother-in-law, who is an engineer and has 2 PhDs, I love making him feel bad in Walmart when I talk to people in front of me. Today, my Ziploc gallon bag touched, I was checking out, and touched the guy in front of me's bananas. So I go, hey man, I just wanted to let you know, you might want to sanitize those bananas. My gallon bags just touched them. My brother-in-law just about fell down in embarrassment. It doesn't bother me. That's my weirdness. I embrace it. And at the end of the day, you have to be gloriously weird, because you give permission to yourself to be who you are. And you cannot thrive and be comfortable after depression if you do not be who you are. Because what led me down that little path, down that hill, that I couldn't stop the ride anymore, was that I was trying to be somebody that other people wanted me to be. They wanted me to be a business owner. They wanted me to be a husband. They wanted me to be mature. They wanted me to act like how adults should act. And I tried to fit into that. And when I tried to fit into that, I denied who I am. I'm probably the weirdest dude in this room right now, or this Zoom right now. I'm probably, if you knew what I was thinking when I get ready for work, or what I'm thinking in the car on the way to you'd probably be like, ooh, that guy's weird. The things that I come up with. I have conversations with my dog. I'm sure people here have conversations with your dog. Admit that. Admit it. Admit when you think outside the box. Some of the greatest comics I grew up watching thought outside the box. And it was the most vulnerable they were when they were on stage because they embraced their glorious weirdness. I think I'm going to actually get t-shirts that say "Be gloriously weird" because it's so important at the end of the day to remember that. That's the biggest thing that helped me thrive through depression. Everybody's depression is different. What helped me thrive also was making lists. I didn't cross things off my lists because that gave me a feeling of failure when I didn't get to cross things off. I'll put little check marks and I'll put numbers. I'll put numbers at what degree I finished that project at. So if I have something that says I need to edit 5 podcasts by the end of the week, and I get to the end of the week and I've only done 3, I'll put a 3. I don't let myself fail anymore. I let myself have things I've accomplished and things I don't accomplish that day. And the funny thing is, when I went to that, when I stopped thinking like an athlete was like, you win or you lose. When I stopped thinking like that and said, there's such a huge in between there, I found each week I'd get competitive with myself and try to do a little bit more of those accomplishments. So if one week I only finished 5 things, the next week I tried to do 6. And it was funny because the athlete in me screamed, no, you have to do 30. No, you don't. I just have to be a little bit better than I was yesterday. And when you do that and you give yourself the achievement of being just a little bit better than you were yesterday, your self-esteem grows every day. And then you pile that on top of saying hello to somebody and brightening their day. And then you turn around at the end of the day and you don't recognize. It's a long road, but at the end of the day, you turn around and you don't recognize that person who is depressed. If I've passed myself at 35, I wouldn't know that I wouldn't have any idea it was me because I don't recognize who it is. And it's funny because when people look at pictures of me before I was 35 and they look at me now, I get so often, that doesn't even look like you. And not in a bad way. In a lot of ways, I get a lot more compliments now. It's because I have that George Clooney disease where every day I get a little bit better looking. So I run to the mirror now. I run to the mirror because I'm like, woo, look at that. That's even better looking than I was yesterday. That's awesome. That's my favorite part of the day, running to the mirror. That's a prime example right there. I wasn't going to say that, but my weirdness said, hey, tell them about your George Clooney disease. But that's what makes me me, is that confidence that I didn't have at 35 that I have now. And I let people compliment me on that. I let people look at a picture of me now and at 35 and say, wow, you're better looking now. I'm like, yeah, I don't take medication for my George Clooney disease. I just let it happen. I let it happen. I'm sure, David, you have the same disease. So it's probably, I think we all might have it. It makes my wife very, very angry. She's like, how do you get grayer and better looking? That's what I want to know. How do you get grayer and better looking? But I think my wife also gets better looking every day, so it's okay. So that's the main thing. I want to touch on those points because at the end of the day, the most important thing is survive. We have to survive the depression. And right now, I think you'll feel it twinging and pushing on you a little bit more because of the way the world is right now. It's hard to find joy with our electronics turned on because everybody's bombarding us with negativity. And that negativity, that energy, I can feel it nipping at me every single day. I watch my news through mostly comics that have podcasts and things like that. So I get a very skewed part of the podcast called The Rogue Right. If you listen to it, just know I'm being satirical, and that is not who I am because I make fun of so many things and there's a negativity to it. But I have to get that comic part of me out. But when I take everything else in, there becomes a point where I limit my screen time and I just turn it off, because you have to, because the negative you're getting in is what you're pushing back out. Because unfortunately, that energy has to go somewhere. I'm a big, firm believer in that. I've watched it happen through coaching for 25 years. My favorite story is I had a low-level athlete that was terrible at bars, horrendous. And when I say bad, I mean bad. And I went to a seminar, and Allison Arnold, who was the head psychologist for USA Gymnastics, was there. And she was talking about positivity. You have to be positive. This has to be positive. We have to be positive. And it was hitting me from all over. And the athlete in me was like, no, I want discipline. No, I want to be accountable. I want all these things. I can't give positive where there isn't positive. And so I went to Allison Arnold after the seminar, and I said, look, it just seems too hippie for me. It just seems too, sorry, Robin. Here's the road though, Robin, here it comes. And she says, there has to be one thing good about that girl's routine. One thing. And I found it. She did one skill actually really well. And I said, that's the hardest skill in your routine. If you can do that skill that well, you should be able to do the whole thing well. So you can win state because you do that skill so well. And I decided to do a little experiment. And every day I told her that same skill. It looks spectacular. If you could do that skill that's so hard, if you could do that well, you can win state. Every day I told her. And guess what happened? Exactly what you think happened. Everything else started getting better. I'd give little corrections here and there. Didn't take much because I was feeding her this positivity every single day. And this kid that I was like, is hopeless on bars, started to shine, started to look good. And then I'd love to tell you she won state, but she took second. So the story's ruined. She didn't accomplish it. She went from an average score of 6 to 7 on bars to an average score of 9.5 and above. That's huge because any coach can get you to a 9, but the athlete has to get you above a 9. They have to be a talent. They have to work hard. They have to do those things. She did it on her own. I just gave her the energy to do it. And then I gave her the confidence to do it. And that's what you have to always have. You always have to have that. No matter what's bombarding us from outside, throw the positive back out because it comes back to you. And that's how I've thrived after depression. That's how I've done it. I've changed my attitude little by little. It took 8, 9, 10 months. And then after a year, I looked back at myself and said, hey, I'm not too bad. What's going on in my life isn't too bad. I think I can get through this. And then every day I gave myself those little achievements. And then all of a sudden my little achievements became big achievements. All of a sudden I started doing better in comedy. I started doing better with my coach. I started doing a lot in my relationships because I stopped worrying about what I was going to get in return. Just gave out what I wanted. And I let it happen. That's about it. I do have a podcast popping on October 1st. It's going to be called The Broken Joker. Survive and Thrive. It will be on Apple, iTunes, and Spotify. I wish I had more to sell y'all, but I don't. COVID, I didn't expect to be on this early. So my website is actually being rebuilt, and my services, I do coaching and do also, like I said, the podcasts are actually my goal right now. I have another one called The Rogue Right. Again, it's satirical, and it's not who I really am. So, but I do have some great guests on. but I found that there wasn't enough positivity going through that podcast. So I made up the Broken Joker. So the Broken Joker on October 1st. So thank y'all.
That's awesome. Thank you, Sean. Jason, that was, thank you for being so transparent and candid. And I'm sure that the recording of this, by the way, I will be recording this and we'll put it up on the YouTube channel and share it on Facebook and such. So, but it'll be up there. So, but I appreciate it.
Thank you.
The podcast Broken Joker. Anybody have any questions? If you have any questions or comments, just open up your mic. I'll call on you when I see your mic open, and we've got a few minutes. Randy?
So this is a risky question, but number one is, do you ever have moments where you go back a little bit? And B, if you do, how do you deal with it?
I do. I have moments where I recognize my triggers to start down that hill. First trigger is diet. If I find myself comforting myself too much with food, my big weakness is soda and donuts.
Oh, yeah.
the two greatest things on earth. If I find myself going over, because those things aren't bad in moderation. And I'll tell you what really hurt me during COVID was DoorDash. DoorDash is the devil, because all I got to do is pick up that phone and say, hey, bring me a dozen donuts. And next thing I know, they're at my door. It's a great tool for people that are high risk and need to stay home. But for those of us that are trying to eat semi-good, it's a terrible thing. But recognizing those triggers, I also find if I'm clenching my hands a lot, I try to recognize the situation I'm in and look around me and see if negativity is a problem. If I'm around toxic people, I will find tension. I will find my muscles get tight, my hands clench. And then I ask myself if I really need to be in that situation, because we all need to be in tough situations. And the situation is never as bad as we put it in our head. Like when I have to talk to an athlete's parents, or if my boss is like, Jason, I need to see you in my office. My first inclination in my head is to go to a negative place. So I have to stop myself from that. And I have to stop myself and say, let's get the facts before we jump to the conclusion. So diet, and then I have to recognize my body posture and things like that. Because it's little ticks. Depression is sneaky that way. It doesn't do it with the 12-pack of soda in 3 hours. It does it by one soda in the morning. And then you're like, I only have one. I'll do 2 sodas. And then all of a sudden I do 6 donuts. And then all of a sudden, nobody wants to hear that diet and exercise help. Because then we have to do it. But it really does. It evens out your body chemistry. And am I saying it's a miracle cure? Not at all. But I can tell you this, I've never walked into my gym to work out and kicked my butt and then walked out of the gym and said, man, I wish I didn't go. I've never said that. Every time I leave, no matter what I feel like, I'm like, I'm glad I went. Mm-hmm. So I try to get those battles little by little and just recognize when they're nipping at me.
Great.
Thanks for your honesty on
Michael,
that.
Did you have something? It. Yeah, Michael.
Yeah, I just wanted to share. I appreciate Jason, like Dave said about your transparency. But I would say that a lot of the tools and lessons you learned can not only be applied to depression, but with addiction or any kind of things that you're struggling with as a person. Because I'm a recovering addict and went through Celebrate Recovery. And the thing that we always said in Celebrate Recovery was the people that are the most scary are the people that don't know they have a problem. You know, because if you're in a world where you don't acknowledge your pain or your hurts and habits, then your only way to find that out is by hitting rock bottom.
Yes.
And so that's what I would share. So I appreciate you being candid about these things.
Thank you. Yeah, I was tested. I won't get into it, but I was tested for dyslexia and other disorders when I was young and outside the school district, because my mom was actually suing the school district because they weren't offering my dyslexia class anymore. And when I got tested by 3 different psychologists, and each one of those psychologists said I had an addictive personality. And the problem is you can get addicted to negativity too. You can get addicted to feeling bad. And so I always stayed away from drugs and alcohol because he told me I had this addictive personality, but I didn't look at the other negativities in my life, thinking those can become addictive too. But so can positivity. So can working out. So can eating well. Those things can become addictive also. So, but yeah, that's so I thought I was doing the right thing by staying away from all those things, but then and then I let something else sneak in because I wasn't paying attention.
Awesome. Thanks. Robin, did you have something?
Yeah, you were saying earlier that you thought women their numbers are higher because we will say how we're feeling more. I think there's also a secondary thing that we tribe up. Men don't do.
Absolutely.
And we have tribe. Like I have
Yeah.
My homeschool mom friends. I mean, my kids are grown, but I'm homeschooling foster kids now. Homeschool mom friends and photography friends, and like
Absolutely.
find each other. And I don't think men do that as well.
No, because we're told lone wolf is the way to go. And it's also the reason women get over breakups faster than men. Even though men won't admit it, women get over it faster because they break up and they go straight to their girlfriend's house and they vent it. Where guys are like, I'll find someone else and
I got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually why I started the Men's Breakfast Network that we do once a month, is because all these women had these women only events that they would announce at each networking meeting, and I'd go, well, crap, what about men? And then finally I said, men need at least an hour a month where we get together and make connection, and then men supporting men. So I started that group and a lot of the guys here, and that's exactly the reason, because we do a lousy job of that. Not because we don't want to help our buds, it's because our buds are too proud to ask.
Absolutely. Ego.
Yeah, I actually
Ego.
through the quarantine, I would because my husband started saying, "God, you're so busy. All your friends have Zoom happy hours. Like you have all of these things." And I'm like, "Well, right." And I'd be like, "So go do it." Like to me, that's a no-brainer. And he does, like, that was weird to him. So I literally would make play dates for my husband to drink with his friends over Zoom.
We call those tea times.
Yeah.
That's why I golf.
And yeah, he never would do it on his own. Like he just doesn't reach out to people.
Yeah.
Then almost resents that I'm very busy with people. And it's like, go for it.
Well, this has been great. Hey guys, Michael, I'm going to open up the mic, and Phyllis and anybody else, but we've only got 5 minutes, so I don't want to abuse anybody who needs to leave at 1:00. But again, let's give Jason another hand. I really appreciate Jason. That was awesome. I wasn't sure, how comedic it would be, but I was kind of really struggling with how can a comedic depression discussion go, but you did create a great balance there. I really do appreciate you, brother.
Thank you.